Hans Grunberg raised the Security Council and says sustainable peace in Yemen is hard amid military escalation. The United Nations accuses Houthi rebels of blocking humanitarian efforts in the country. The Giant Brigades head to Ma'rib after liberating Shabwa from rebels. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Rushan Fuad. UN Security Council held a special session to discuss the situation in Yemen. The session comes in light of the Houthi escalation and the militia's rejection of the UN peace plan. The UN Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, said there is no resolution to the conflict can be found in the battlefield, stressing that warring parties must talk. He reiterated his appeals to warring parties to respect, uphold their obligations under international humanitarian law, including the protection of civilians and protected objects. The Swedish diplomat added that militarization reports of Hodeidah port are worrying as it is a lifeline for Yemenis, pointing out that Ummah has requested to undertake an inspection.
However, there is no sustainable long-term solution to be found on the battlefield. Therefore, I will continue to stress that warring parties can, should, and indeed must talk, even if they are not ready to put down their arms.
The United Nations raised concerns over the current escalation in Yemen, and UN spokesperson Stefan Dujarric said this escalation blocks the humanitarian response and prolongs suffering of Yemenis.
We're concerned about the renewed fighting. The first victims of the fighting are the civilians. It continues to make our humanitarian work that much more complicated, that much more difficult to deliver aid to those who need it, and it just prolongs the years-long suffering of the Yemeni people. And we would encourage people to rally around the efforts of Hans Grunberg and the United Nations to bring about peace and stability.
The United Nations Assistant for Humanitarian Affairs accused the Houthi rebels of obstructing relief operations in Yemen. He explained that obstacles still exist and the militia interfere in relief operations. The UN official reiterated his appeal for providing safe crossing for humanitarian workers, supplies, as well as for commercial imports. The Giant Brigade joined forces with other forces in the south of Ma'rib Governorate and took control of the main and secondary roads linking the governorates of Shabwa and Ma'rib. A military source said that their coalition, the Giant Brigades and the government forces, cut the supply lines from the militia in the south of Ma'rib. The coalition launched a large-scale military operation in order to complete the liberation of Yemen from the Houthis. A spokesman for the joint forces confirmed that the Giant Brigades controlled 60% of Harib district in Ma'rib, east of Yemen. This report has more details.
The map of control over the land in Yemen is constantly changing through field confrontation that the country has been suffering from for nearly 7 years. The military reality now seems more wider than ever, as the battles between the government forces and the Houthis have expanded on several fronts, especially in the oil provinces of Ma'rib and Shabwa. Military sources said the artillery of the army and the coalition fighters targeted gatherings, reinforcements and mechanisms of the Iranian-backed Houthi militia on the theater of military operations on the southern fronts of Ma'rib Governorate. The government forces and the Berber resistance in Ma'rib were able to liberate and restore strategic military sites in the southern fronts of the Governorate, most notably Umbrage training camp. The Giant Brigades announced the liberation of the entire Shabwa Governorate after a 10-day military operation, during which they managed to liberate 3 districts. The military developments came at a time when there seems to be no foreseeable prospect for a political solution to end the Yemeni crisis, despite the ongoing international efforts to end the conflict. Observers say the government controls 60% of Yemen's geographical areas, while the Houthi control about 25%. Since the beginning of February last year, the Houthis have intensified their attacks in Ma'rib to control it, as it is the most important stronghold for the government, in addition to its oil and gas wealth. The war in Yemen costed the country's economy $126 billion in one of the worst humanitarian and economic crises in the world.
Still in Harib, the forces of the Southern Giant Brigade shot down a Houthi booby-trapped drone. The Giant Forces Air Defense tracked the drone and shot it down before reaching its targets. Medical sources in the capital Sana'a reported that hospitals were overcrowded with the bodies of the dead Houthi militia. Coinciding with that, other sources said that the militia launched a wide campaign to recruit new fighters to the front lines. Local sources said the militia forced its affiliates in various neighborhoods of the capital Sana'a to mobilize and recruit new fighters. Houthi militia inflicts every area they control with their deadly mines nationwide. With the liberation of Shabwa, local human rights organization urged the militia to hand over the maps of minefields that they have spread everywhere. More details on the story are within this report.
Houthi rebels seems determined to inflict Yemenis with death everywhere, the last of which is planting mines in large scale in different areas of Shabwa. A human rights organization spoke of alarming reports about Houthis' contamination of Usaylan and Bayhan, including residential areas with mines, explosive devices and unexploded ordnance. Miyun Human Rights Organization warned in a statement that these mines represent a severe danger to civilians. Earlier Yemen landmine records confirmed that 5 citizens were killed and others injured in an explosion of Houthi-planted mines in Usaylan. The organization called on citizens to remain alarmed and to be cautious of such danger. It also called on displaced to not return back to their homes, as those areas are still contaminated. Meanwhile, Miyun organization called for displaced to remain until such areas be cleared from mines and war remnants. It also called for Houthis to share mine-laying maps in the districts. The human rights organization stressed the need for the United Nations to pressure Houthis' leadership to hand over the maps to prevent more civilians from being killed. The organization requested the mining programs, including Massam project, to mobilize their engineering teams to Shabwa's liberated districts and clear them from mines so citizens can return back to their homes safely. For his part, the director of the National Mine Action Program, Brigadier General Amin Al-Aqili, said that response teams of Yamak and Massam have moved to liberate areas of mines planted by Houthis. He added that 3 engineering teams had previously been sent to Usaylan, pointing out that the mining efforts would include Al-Safra, Saq and high-impact areas in Usaylan and Bayhan. The official warned citizens in the areas from approaching suspicious and dangerous areas until they are cleared and secured by the engineering teams.
The United Nations Migration Agency recorded more than 3,400 individuals who were displaced at least once in the first week of this year. The IOM indicated the conflict was the main reason for displacement, accounting for 98% of the total, followed by economic reasons that accounted for 2%. It estimated that the number of displaced could be bigger, reaching more than 4,200 individuals during the same period. The humanitarian situation in Yemen has reached unprecedented levels in all sectors, and in all categories of the society, the war has taken its toll on the most vulnerable. More details about this is in the following report.
Yemen remained the 4th largest displacement crisis in the world, says the United Nations in its latest report. With an estimated 4 million internally displaced people, and with conflict intensified in Ma'rib, Shabwa, Al-Bayda, Ta'az and Hudaydah, challenges sustained humanitarian response and resulted in aggravated needs and further displacement. In its 2021 humanitarian review, the United Nations said that out of an estimated 25,591 families who have experienced displacement the past year, nearly 60% of them have been displaced in or to Ma'rib. As 2021 closed, Yemen also remained the world's worst humanitarian crisis, with some 20.7 million people in need of some form of humanitarian assistance or protection. The humanitarian wing of the United Nations said that the conflict-driven and economic collapse situation has been exacerbated by COVID-19, heavy rains, and flooding, stressing that despite funding shortfalls and challenging operation environment, 195 humanitarian organizations continue to deliver aid to an average of 11.3 million people per month. The past year started with the country on the verge of famine. As 2022 started, aid agencies have already raised the alarm that they are running out of funds to continue to provide food assistance to 13 million people in Yemen. the economy was subject to further shocks. The United Nations said that issues destabilized Yemen's economy and pushed food prices upwards by 11% in government-controlled areas, namely currency collapse and escalating economic warfare over monetary policies. Food prices have more than doubled across much of the country, making basic food unaffordable for ordinary people.
Coming next. In Taiz, the phenomenon of kidnapping girls raises social concerns amid security mess in the city.
اضطرينا أن نغادر من ذي ونزحنا.
الله يستنقلكم يا محويتني، لا الله يستنقل.
Welcome back. Since the Houthi militia took control of Yemen in 2014, women continue paying a high cost of this war. Violations of human rights and international law were committed against women. One of these grave violations is the abduction of girls, students, and women. More details are in the following report.
The phenomenon of the abduction of girls, female students, and women have increased unprecedentedly in the Yemeni capital Sana'a and the areas that are under the control of the Houthi militia in Yemen. An Amnesty International report describes Yemen as one of the worst places in the world to be a woman. It said that the women survived in oppressive, deteriorating conditions stripped of equality. Yemeni Network for Rights and Freedoms recorded more than 770 cases in which women were arrested or kidnapped by the Houthis and more than 195 cases of forced disappearance. Some of them were abducted for putting pressure on their families or due to false reports, while others were abducted for unknown reasons. Every day the abducted victims increase, and their photos are spread in the streets and schools and via the social media. One of the latest victims is a girl from Al-Harq family in Taiz named Khawla Abdu Al-Harq, who was kidnapped a day after she led a protest in front of the governorate building to demand the arrest of the armed gang members affiliated to the Houthi militia, who killed her father and a number of her family members. Sources said that the girl Khawla Abdu Al-Harq left her house in the morning and went to Taiz University to take her exam, but she didn't return back. The family accuses the gang that follows Al-Arraj, who burned their homes months ago, of being behind the kidnapping of their daughter Khawla and the assault and shooting of their homes. Khawla's fate is unknown, like many other girls who are abducted and kidnapped by Houthis in their prisons. The Yemeni Organization for Combating Human Trafficking confirmed that the armed Houthi militia continued committing the most serious and horrific abuses in its secret prisons against the abducted and forcibly disappeared women. Houthi militia subjected more than 70 women detained in its prisons, including secret prisons, to cruel and degrading treatment, including torture and rape, driving some of them to commit suicide. In the end, the current situation needs a quick action to be taken to stop these immoral and inhuman crimes and practices, to put an end to this futility and abuses committed against the rights of women and girls, and break the silence about them, as they are crimes and abuses that cannot be tolerated.
The United Nations said 1 woman dies every 2 hours during childbirth. The organization said that this is about 5 times about the average in the Middle East and North Africa. The report estimated that 5 million women have limited access to health services. The following report has more details.
1 woman dies every 2 hours during childbirth from almost entirely preventable causes. Women and girls of childbearing ages 15 to 49 years are among the most extremely vulnerable in Yemen's conflict. An estimated 5 million women and girls of childbearing age and 1.7 million pregnant and breastfeeding women have limited or no access to reproductive health services, including antenatal care, safe delivery, postnatal care, family planning, and emergency obstetric and newborn care. Over 1 million pregnant and breastfeeding women are acutely malnourished and risk giving birth to newborns with severely weak growth due to rising food insecurity. The UN estimated that maternal humanity ratio in Yemen in 2017 was 164 maternal deaths per 100,000 live births. This is about 5 times the average in the Middle East and North Africa region. The key drivers of the high maternal mortality ratio in Yemen are poor access and utilization of life-saving reproductive health services. Obstetric gynecologists and midwives are particularly scarce, affecting access to life-saving operations when needed. Between 5 to 10% of all pregnancies need cesarean intervention to save the lives of mother or the newborn baby. The quality of care has continued to deteriorate due to underinvestment in healthcare. Moreover, women of reproductive age, including pregnant women, are facing challenges in accessing the reproductive health supplies and services due to the shortage of medicines and supplies at health facilities. Medical equipment is either lacking or in a poor state, as proper maintenance regimes have not been followed. Whenever there are stockouts of medicines at health facilities, patients would be asked to buy medicines from private pharmacies. Yet, given widespread poverty caused by the prolonged crisis, many are faced with the choice between buying prescribed medicines or buying food or other basic needs from the little resources they have. Without access to life-saving reproductive and maternal health medicines, approximately 1 million women estimated to deliver annually are particularly at risk. As the conflict continues, maternal deaths in Yemen will increase as women and girls of childbearing ages struggle to access the reproductive health services they desperately need. Funding for reproductive health, which remains severely underfunded, remains urgent not only to sustain but to scale up reproductive health services.
Yemen recorded the largest deficit in trade balance since the beginning of the year. The deficit reached $7.8 billion. On the other hand, the annual report of the Security Council team of experts revealed that the Houthi rebels initiate economic crisis to create a black market. The report added that the Houthis run the black markets and receive illegal fees from the sale.
The areas under the Houthi militia control are experiencing a stifling fuel crisis, which has caused some power stations to stop working, and parts of the cities are plunged into darkness. Hundreds of cars crammed in front of petrol stations, most of which were closed for unknown reasons. Many residents interpreted this as a deliberate crisis created by the rebels to obtain additional funds from the people's pockets in order to recruit more fighters and to compensate for the militia losses in the governorates of Shabwa and Ma'rib. People in the Yemeni capital said long lines of cars filled the streets near the city's fuel stations, in a scene they used to see during the past years. One of the people said the Houthis are trying to create a fuel and gas crisis. They confirmed that electricity would be stopped under the pretext that there is a lack of diesel. This comes at a time when the citizen is obliged to pay electricity bills on a weekly basis. The salaries, however, are being paid on an annual basis. Citizens complain that it takes them a month and a half to obtain the gas cylinder that the militia sells. They said the leaders of the rebels are profiting from the black market. Others affirm that the economic crisis in the Houthi militia-controlled areas are cooked up as fuel appears in large quantities on the black market, with prices are at more than the official one. According to the World Food Programme, living conditions in Yemen in general continue to deteriorate due to the weakness of the economy during the past year, as food prices and the prices of other basic commodities rose significantly.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. Hans Gromberg briefs the Security Council and says sustainable peace in Yemen is hard amid military escalation. The United Nations accuses Houthi rebels of blocking humanitarian efforts in the country. The Giant Brigades head to Ma'rib after liberating Shabwa from rebels. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. This is Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.